Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the world sees a version of you, and yet somehow it's still not the real one? When recognition surrounds you, applause echoes, but inside you feel quietly unobserved? Tonight, I'll take you to a place few have imagined, where the real self exists beyond headlines. Beyond the noise, the city hums softly below, a grid of amber lights stretching into the distance. Streets appear empty, but movement persists in slow, unnoticed patterns, a taxi gliding past, a single pedestrian pausing under a flickering lamp. From high above, everything seems both alive and distant, like watching a simulation rather than a life lived. He sits in a room bathed in muted light. A sleek desk. A single cup of coffee, long grown cold. Around him, screens display equations, designs, distant cities, interlaced with abstract images that seem to pulse softly. Not a trace of conversation. No notifications demanding attention. Just the faint, rhythmic hum of electronics and the patient tick of time. For years, he moved at a speed the world assumed was necessary, decisions executed before hesitation could even form. Ideas launched before doubt could take hold. Everyone admired the motion, the brilliance, the audacity to attempt the impossible. But motion has a cost. And tonight, that cost arrives as silence, because there is a difference between being seen and being understood. The cameras capture the spectacle, the headlines capture the narrative, but no lens, no story. No voice can capture the quiet moments between choices, the ones that define who you are. He leans back, eyes resting on the cityscape through the window. Rain clouds drift slowly, diffusing neon reflections on wet asphalt. It's mesmerizing, hypnotic. These moments aren't about accomplishment. They're about noticing. The quiet interplay of light and shadow. The way a single street lamp illuminates a puddle, which in turn reflects 1,000 tiny stories. And yet, even here, in this solitude carefully chosen, there is a tension. Not external, but internal. The question that circles endlessly: if the world sees my image, what of my essence? What of the parts that cannot be engineered, designed, or tweeted? It is then he remembers a conversation from long ago. Not public, not recorded, but etched in memory. A brief exchange, filled with pauses instead of words. Someone who looked beyond performance, beyond facade, and simply acknowledged presence. It was fleeting, almost invisible, but it planted a seed that recognition without understanding is hollow. That the real measure of connection is silent, the challenge is subtle yet profound. Because admitting this truth to himself feels more difficult than launching any project or solving any equation. The world measures speed, motion, productivity. It rarely measures presence. And yet he senses that this is the foundation of everything truly meaningful. Then comes the twist. The realization that the name, the identity, the persona everyone believes they know is secondary. The essential truth is not in the outer projection at all. It lives in these fleeting moments of observation, reflection, and patience. The world expects announcements, revelations, and headlines. But real understanding comes quietly and often. Unnoticed. He closes his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of years of motion giving way to stillness. The truth emerges softly. It has never been about proving something to anyone else. It has always been about reconciling what he sees in the mirror with what the world believes it sees. Presence over performance. Substance over spectacle. Side. Night deepens. The city hums and breathes below, unaware of the introspection unfolding above. And in that quiet, the question lingers, opening rather than closing the loop. If the world only knows a name, a face, a persona, how much of ourselves truly remains? Because the real journey, he realizes, is not measured by rockets or innovation, not by fame or headlines, but by the understanding that some truths cannot be shared, only lived. And yet, the story he carries is not fully told, not fully revealed. There is more to uncover, more to reflect upon, more to experience, a narrative that waits for the patient, the attentive, the ones willing to linger in silence. The city lights flicker as if affirming this quiet revelation, a subtle prelude to what comes next. And as he turns back to the desk, the screen still glowing softly, A single thought remains suspended in the air, the truth about space and humanity. The memory comes slowly, almost like a tide rising over a quiet shore. It is not one event, but a collection of fleeting fragments, late nights filled with equations, the soft hum of machinery. Moments when the world outside paused and he was alone with thought. He recalls walking through an empty hallway of a building he barely remembers visiting, fluorescent lights casting long reflections on polished floors. A voice had spoken then, not loudly, not demanding attention, just a simple observation. Something that went unnoticed at the time. Almost swallowed by the noise of ambition and deadlines. It was a moment that required nothing in return. No performance, no proof. Just presence. That is the challenge he now faces. Presence is unfamiliar. Presence is patient. Presence cannot be accelerated, optimized, or measured. The world he inhabits rewards motion, output, constant progression. Yet here, in reflection, he senses that the moments that matter most are precisely those that resist control. The realization is unsettling, because throughout his life he had solved problems, designed solutions, and built systems for impossibilities. But this quiet, elusive understanding cannot be solved. It can only be experienced. He remembers failing to respond, not out of disregard, but because life's momentum demanded his attention elsewhere. Emails, meetings, launches, they consumed him. And by the time he looked up, the person, the moment, the quiet connection had already receded, leaving only absence. Time, he understands, does not pause. It does not wait. And what we fail to notice quietly becomes permanent, yet the twist comes not as regret, but as clarity. The silence he thought was distance was not abandonment. It was openness. Space left unfilled. A patient invitation to engage when readiness finally arrives. He thinks about the name he has carried through speculation, rumor, and expectation. The world anticipates revelation, shock, or confession. But the truth is softer, more delicate. It belongs not to the spectacle, but to understanding. In this soft city glow, he perceives the cost of years spent moving without pause. Achievements, accolades, and innovation had brought satisfaction, but never the depth of presence. Recognition had never equaled understanding, and perhaps never would. The clock ticks quietly. Outside, the street is empty, save for the distant hum of a few cars. The city is breathing. So too must he. And then the realization deepens. The name he contemplates, the identity everyone speculates about, is not only about another person. It is a mirror, a reflection of the part of himself that has been quiet, patient, and observant. The part left behind in pursuit of speed, efficiency, and recognition. Breaking silence, he now knows, is not about revealing the name to the world. It is about reclaiming a self that existed before motion became a shield. Reconnecting with the quiet version of oneself, the one who listened, waited, and observed. He returns to the desk, the glow of the monitor casting soft shadows. Outside, the night begins to thin, hints of early dawn touching the horizon. A subtle shift, imperceptible to the world, but profound in its quiet significance. And just as he reaches toward the keyboard, the open loop lingers. The last message, the one he almost ignored, was never the end. It was the beginning of something far more intricate, far more human, and far more necessary than any public revelation could ever convey. There is a particular quiet that arrives just before understanding. It is not peace nor tension, but a pause, as if life itself is holding its breath, waiting to see whether you are finally ready to notice what has always been there. He remains by the window, hands lightly resting on the cool glass. Below, the city has almost surrendered to sleep. Streetlights stretch in long amber lines. A few cars move like silent glimmers across intersections. Skyscrapers stand dark, reflecting a million tiny stories back at him. For years, he believed silence meant distance. Messages unanswered, conversations fading, presence lost. The mind fills the gaps with assumptions, the heart with conclusions. But memory has its own timing. Earlier tonight, while sifting through old files, he finds a message long buried, short, calm, patient, something he had seen before but ignored in the rush of deadlines and demands. A note that asked nothing, expected nothing, and yet contained everything. Rereading it now, it strikes him. Silence had never been rejection. It had been understanding, openness, space for growth. And in that realization, years of assumptions rearrange themselves. The world teaches people to watch for dramatic losses, loud endings, unmistakable failures. Yet the shifts that matter most often happen quietly, almost politely, until they become permanent. Success, achievement, recognition, they brought satisfaction, yes, but not depth. Each milestone was followed by the same quiet return to thought, the same subtle awareness of what had been missed. Asterisk, the challenge now is inward. Speaking the name he has carried in speculation is no longer about the world. It is about reclaiming honesty. It is about acknowledging uncertainty, how it will be received, whether it still matters, and whether time has changed the meaning entirely. For someone accustomed to solving problems, this one has no formula. There are no diagrams, no deadlines, no equations. Only presence, only patience. Only the courage to confront a truth that cannot be engineered or predicted. Then comes the twist. The name is not simply a person or a revelation for the public. It is a symbol of a version of himself that existed before constant motion reshaped life. A version that observed without judgment, listened without expectation, and allowed moments to breathe. Speaking the name means reconnecting with that self. It means understanding that some sacrifices go unnoticed until years later, when silence finally gives them shape. The revelation is gentle but profound. Clarity is not a force. It is a quiet arrival. The city remains still beneath him, as if holding its breath with him. Outside, dawn begins to touch the horizon, softening shadows. He reaches for the keyboard and pauses, aware that breaking silence is not about spectacle. It is about finally speaking to himself, acknowledging what has been patiently waiting all along. And just as his fingers hover, a memory surfaces, one small overlooked detail from long ago, which reshapes the meaning of the name entirely, and hints that this moment is far from an ending. Morning arrives quietly, almost hesitantly. The sky shifts from deep blue to pale gray, a light neither night nor day, as if the world itself is pausing before fully waking. The city begins to stir below, unaware that somewhere above, a decision long delayed is finally finding its shape. He watches the horizon instead of the screen. For years, clarity seemed like a sudden breakthrough, a flash of revelation after relentless effort. But this clarity is different. It comes gently, almost kindly. He recalls the final conversation years ago that had seemed insignificant at the time. A single sentence spoken softly, "Take your time." He had interpreted it as distance and ending. Now he understands it as permission to grow, to evolve, to become someone else before fully understanding what mattered. The name, the identity the world speculated about, was never intended for public scrutiny. It was never meant for headlines or gossip. It was a reminder, a quiet proof that some people enter life not to stay forever, but to reveal who we are beneath ambition and motion. He types the name once. Not dramatically, not for show. Just once, he reads it slowly. A sense of calm washes over him. The pressure, the urgency, the need for recognition, all dissolve. He does not send it. It is no longer necessary. The silence has been broken internally. Outside, sunlight touches the buildings, spreading warmth across glass and steel. Morning traffic begins, routines resume, the world continues as before. Yet something subtle has shifted. The real story, he realizes, was never about who the name belonged to. It was about why it mattered, about what it revealed, the parts of himself that had been waiting quietly for acknowledgement. Some silences are never meant to be broken publicly. They are meant to be understood. If tonight you find yourself reflecting on a memory, a name, or a feeling long stored away, do not rush past it. Pause, sit with it. Let it remind you of what patience and quiet observation can reveal about yourself. And if this story resonated with you, another awaits, a reflection on why people enter our lives at the precise moment we are not ready, and how understanding often arrives years later. Not for answers, but for insight, for reflection, and for the quiet revelation that waits for the patient. You may want to experience that next, to continue the journey into silence, presence, and understanding.